Good morning. It is 9:38 a.m. on Sunday, June 14th, 2020. I'm Christiana Ellis. I've been up for a little while. This is 5 more minutes. It is Sunday, which means I'm continuing my rewatch of The Legend of Korra with Season 1, Episode 11, Skeletons in the Closet, the second to last episode of, Book 1. And so we really have kind of part one of a two-parter here, which means that there are, several things that are not left fully resolved, but, that's how it goes with part ones of two-parters. But we begin with, we recall that we left off last time knowing that the Unified Nations fleet, Unified Forces fleet was on their way. Team Avatar having to go into hiding to wait for reinforcements and so on. We begin with showing that the Equalists are in charge and starting to announce what their plans are. So basically they're saying, okay, they're going to make bending illegal. They're saying that the tyrannical government has been overthrown. And they put a big Amon mask on the statue of Aang in the bay. And basically, even though it frankly seems pretty impractical, it looks like part of the plan to stamp out bending forever is literally to have Amon just over and over again, one at a time, take away people's bending, which is simultaneously horrific from the standpoint of all of those people having their bending taken away, but also kind of impractical. Like, you're gonna do that to every bender in the whole world? If Amon's the only one who can do it, at least it doesn't seem to take much out of him or anything. But it just seems like you've got your enigmatic revolution leader, and you're gonna just make him spend all of his time doing that. Anyway, it's definitely scary from the perspective of anyone who might in that. And I guess part of the idea too is just to scare benders into going into hiding and not showing their bending, right? Because you don't want to be captured and have your bending taken away, so you stop doing your bending in public and so on, right? Like, that's part of the idea. But yeah, scary. And then we revealed that two of the chi blockers in the back are actually Korra and Mako in disguise, so that they could listen to the rally. We see that they've been in hiding in the underground where a lot of the homeless people are, and it's actually a kind of a fun thing that it's a fun detail that part of why they've found a place there and are welcomed there is that the educated, kind hobo that Korra cooked a fish for in the first episode is now welcoming them there and talking about how, benders and non-benders alike live down there in the sewer tunnels. But, hey, beggars can't be choosers in this context, right? So, sorry, my dog is woofing at me. I don't know what he wants other than just for me to only pay attention to him and feed him and pet him constantly. That is what he wants. Okay. Alright, good point. We see that Korra is impatient, but they're all awaiting the arrival of the fleet. And then, sure enough, the fleet shows up, but it is taken out by mines and airplanes. Now, there's a part of me that starts to resist this a little bit, in the sense that Amon and Sato seem to have just one too many tricks up their sleeve. Like, yes, we get that they're supposed to be these master strategists, but it just feels like, how did they get all those mines placed in the bay and nobody knew about it? Where are all these planes been? And if they had them before, why did they really? So they made all of the airships in a secret base. And then they used those to take over the city, but they actually had these planes also in reserve and didn't use them to begin with. I guess that's fine. It makes sense, really, in the sense that there might be saying, okay, well, the airships are for taking the city, and then the planes are for when the fleet shows up. Okay, sure. But there is a part of me that starts to kind of say, well, wait a minute. This is like how, what are they going to reveal they've got next? But in any case, we've got some World War I, World War II style combat here with the planes versus the ships. Ships have some neat stuff with basically firebending artillery, where they've got this sort of cannon funnel thing that firebenders sort of bend into, and it makes it kind of a distinct blast, and that's kind of cool. But unfortunately, they don't have defenses oriented against things that move so fast, like the planes. Against airships, sure, but those don't move so fast. These, they can't turn them in time to track these fighter bombers, and so the fleet is pretty much annihilated. Korra is able to rescue General Iroh. I think one minor failing in the episode is that she rescues Iroh, but theoretically there's hundreds more people on those ships. Did they just all die? Where are they? We don't see any evidence of anyone being rescued except Iroh, which feels a little off. It feels like we should have seen a few more in the background, at least, when we go back to the underground base, just because otherwise it really suggests that Korra saved Iroh and nobody else, and everyone else just died. And maybe that is actually kind of what they want to suggest. Not that, like, Korra chose not to save other people, but just that, like, they want it to be just this devastating loss, but that because it's a kids show, they maybe feel like they can't hit that too hard. Maybe, but I don't know. It just feels like that was an unanswered question that a reasonable person might ask. In any event, now after this loss, Iroh says there is another wave of ships, but we need to make sure they don't just get hit just like this last one. So he messages them to not approach until they get the signal. So the plan is they need to try to find a way to ground those planes, and so that's like the new mission. But in the meantime, Korra is not willing to go. She feels like she needs to confront Amon, and there's a little bit of Return of the Jedi vibes there, right? Where you have Han and Leia going down, and C-3PO and R2-D2 going down to deactivate the shield generator so that the fleet can come in. And then where in the meantime you have Korra as Luke going to confront Vader and the Emperor. I mean, I guess Luke didn't have a boyfriend or girlfriend that came with him in that one, but so it's not a perfect match, but there's some similarity there. But in the meantime, Mako and Korra had been reminiscing a little bit earlier in the episode, realizing that it's like it hasn't been that much time, but it feels like forever since she first arrived at the city. But, here's where Mako decides he's not going to let her go by herself to confront Amon. But I think in making that call, it finally is obvious to him what has been obvious to Asami for a while, which is he does have feelings for Korra. And he doesn't press that issue right now, but he recognizes that when Asami confronted him earlier, and he resisted defensively, he realizes now she was right, and he can't help it, and he feels bad because he does care about her, and so he does actually, go and talk to Asami and just say, I'm sorry, I wish this didn't have to hurt you. I do care about you, but I recognize that what's happening isn't fair to you, and I wish that it could be another way, but it isn't. And so, they do kind of a nicely understated breakup there, and I think that's interesting. Although apparently in the commentary for this episode, they say they got a lot of feedback of people that didn't for whom that scene was maybe too subtle. They felt like it didn't read as a breakup, and therefore it felt like cheating when Mako and Korra become a couple. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like do you really have to spell it out explicitly, every single detail? I felt like that seemed like a reasonably nice, but like clear if understated breakup scene. And Asami, of course, is sad, but understands. Like she knew before he did, apparently. So the plan then is that we've got the one mission that's going to go try to ground the planes. But in the meantime, we follow Mako and Korra as they go to try to infiltrate Amon's base, where he's set up in Air Temple Island. And they're dressed as the Chi Blockers. And then there's a nice little bit of dual-purpose storytelling where we get a moment of tension when they're sneaking on dressed as Chi Blockers, but the lieutenant guy sees them out of place and is like, uh-oh, are they going to get caught? And it's just like this little obstacle where they have to sort of fool him. But in having that little scene, we also get the information, but you're not supposed to be here because all the Chi Blockers are supposed to be security for the big rally at the arena. So now they know about the rally. But then most of the back half of the episode consists of the flashback as Korra and Mako find that although Amon's not home right now, they were planning to basically hide in the temple and ambush Amon when he returns. But instead, they find that Tarlok is there as a prisoner, and Tarlok tells, the whole story as he knows it, which is to say, we already learned Tarlok was Yakon's son, but now we know that Amon was also. Amon and Tarlok are brothers. So Tarlok says that, originally his older brother named Noatak, 3 years older, they were, sons of Yakon who had his face changed surgically and then went off and married a waterbender. And it's interesting that, he says, like, there was a while there where it seemed like Yakon had given up his ambitions, what with his bending gone. But then when he had 2 kids that were both waterbenders, he started wanting to train them to be his revenge. He wanted to train them to be able to kill the Avatar and be his revenge. And so this is where, his abusive dark side comes out in the training, as he's training them to be bloodbenders like he was before Aang took his bending. And, it's a sad story with beats that I think are not altogether unfamiliar, meaning like there have been lots of stories about like how many villains out there are villains because they've got daddy issues, right? I mean, yeah, but I feel like there's some nuance to this one. For one, the fact that Yakon or Tarlok and Noatak each had kind of their own variation of what this was doing, because Noatak, the older brother who became Amon, was the better of the two at the bloodbending. Like, it came more naturally to him. He kind of enjoyed it more. He was the favorite, but then that also meant all the pressure was on him. Whereas Tarlok was kind of the more kind-hearted. It didn't come as naturally to him, and he felt bad about doing it. Like, we see them doing it to animals and it being very uncomfortable and painful for the animals, and he feels bad about it. He doesn't like doing it. But then he gets derided as weak and cowardly by his father, until eventually their time comes when Yakon makes a pretty awful training mistake. He tells the boys to bloodbend each other. Once Noatak does it to Tarlok, Tarlok is just saying, that feels awful. I don't want to do that to anybody, and he refuses. So then when Yakon starts to get all abusive about it, that's when Noatak steps in and says, oh, you're the weak one. You can't even do it anymore. He's bloodbending his own father. And then he just says, this is not as powerful as you think it is, because the Avatar was able to take it away. So that's more powerful. The ability to take bending away is the most powerful thing. And so what we end up here with, even though there's aspects of of how Yakone is using bloodbending to take people's bending away. We don't like understand the details of that exactly. Now what we have is we break down that both Amon and Tarlok are both kind of antagonists that have ambitions that are not necessarily in and of themselves evil, but they've been so twisted by their emotional psychic baggage that everything that they touch kind of turns bad, you know. So like Noatak cares about people. He wants to take care of people. He wants the city to be a safe place where, you know, everyone can flourish. But he sort of has this attitude of, well, but you're going to do whatever needs to be done in order to make that happen, right? And so, you know, he takes care of benders first. He has these strict rules, like when he's on the council, you know, he imposes the curfew. Anyone who tries to, you know, disrupt the peace and safety is treated as an enemy. And so that's kind of his whole baggage, right? And then of course to his shame, he says, and then when it came to it and you were calling me on all of that, I bloodbended just like my father did. And now it's been taken away. But like, he's basically like, recall in the last couple of weeks we talked about how it was so obvious that it was not Tarlok's plan to do that with the Avatar, right? Like, she basically forced his hand, and then once he had sort of revealed himself as a bloodbender, everything was ruined. Everything he had been working towards was gone, and it just evaporated, and it blew up everything. And we see now that he's ashamed of having done it, because it's like, I thought that I was going to do better than my father. My father was a crime lord. I was trying to stop people like that, and yet put my back against the wall, and I do the same thing that he did. And so he feels bad about it. And in the meantime, we have Amon, who has come to the conclusion that this bloodbending is so evil that bending itself must be evil, and it needs to be stamped out. And he's going to do whatever it takes to have that happen. And yet he's doing it in this, you know, tyrannical, cruel way. And that it is all tied up in, you know, like this idea that it's evil, but he's willing to use evil to fight evil, essentially. And also, the key from Korra's perspective after all of this is recognizing Amon has built his whole revolution on a lie. He tells people he wears the mask because he was scarred by a firebender who killed his family. That's not true. He claims to not be a bender and that his ability to take bending away comes from the spirits. That's not true. Well, we don't 100% know exactly what's going on there, but the idea that he's a bender comes from a bending family, the son of a notable bending criminal, and that the whole, like, basically that the story is a lie, right? You know, it's like, from her perspective, it's like, if we can prove that, the enthusiasm of his followers will evaporate. Now, what I'll say about that right now is that I'm honestly, you know, not to make this too political, but I think what we're seeing in U.S. politics of late is that there isn't, you know, when you have people following someone who wants to, you know, has fascist tendencies, they're willing to make an awful lot of rationalizations to continue supporting him. So, like, would Amon's people all turn their backs on him if they learn the truth? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. In any event, that's the new plan, is that we know he's going to be at this big rally. They're going to see if they can try to find a way to prove that he's actually a bender there. And that's where we leave off in this episode. So next week, we're going to talk about Book 1, Episode 12, Endgame. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.